Right. So welcome, Archana. Archana is a class fellow of mine from MSU. That's how I would introduce you first. But she is now the vice president at Adobe in Utah at their headquarters and looking after the enterprise design team. Right? And so stage is all hers. You've seen her accomplishments in the poster. She's been featured everywhere and she's been lecturing a lot. But I think I will request you guys to give her a hard time today by asking a lot of questions because so we have this Monday sharing where there's a topic which Anubhav, who's one of the project architects here, he decides the topic and everyone shares their thoughts on that topic, and that's how we start our week. And of late I've seen that, especially in the last 1 year or so, technology and emerging trends of how we are looking at design are getting repeated in our discussions over and over again. And you being in the design technology field would probably have a lot of questions to field today. But yeah, over to you.
Yeah, please. Give me a hard time, ask me questions. This is not a lecture by any means. And any questions you have about Nishant or how he was in college, I'm happy to answer that. Can you hear me okay? Do we need this mic or?
No, we can do without it.
Can you all hear me otherwise?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll open with this. This bears a lot of. It anchors me in the fact that no matter what the technology is, we bring value as human beings for what we are uniquely disposed to do. So last year, I was here in India around the same time. And I was supposed to be, I've been working for Adobe for 17 years now. And I'll tell you a little bit about my journey of how I got here. I'm going from, my dad still tells me, like, I sent you to school to do architecture. I have no idea what to do now. So that's a story we'll get to. Anyway, so last year, I was here, I had been working for Adobe for 15 years and we get a sabbatical, we get to take some time off. So I had 6 weeks off. So I had a pretty giant plan. I was going to go surprise and meet all my friends. None of these guys knew, but I was planning on, just calling up and landing up. But 2-3 days before I landed in India, my father was developing some symptoms that didn't seem quite right. So within hours of me arriving, I accompanied him for his checkup. He had an angiogram, and it turns out that all 3 of his arteries, primary arteries, thank God he hadn't had a heart attack, were 75% and above blocked. So he needed a triple bypass surgery at that point. And so I quickly figured, I was there, 6 weeks I had off anyway, so, plans changed and I was very grateful that I didn't have to make any changes. My child was with me, I didn't have to think about, my mom was there to take care of all of that. I could jump in and actually be of help. Because most often than not, I'm sitting 12 hours away from them wondering, how I can be of better, help for my parents at timely need. So it was very fortunate I was there. And the reason I'm saying that was, it was a pretty drastic, right? It's a piece of information you have to process a lot. Very lucky, the cardiac surgeon who was reviewing my dad was incredibly good at the job. Very good. So the decision was whether to do a robotic surgery or a not robotic surgery. And you know the drift of where I'm going with this. So I'm sitting there and this gentleman, this doctor, did such a fantastic job of explaining to me what was going to happen if I got to choose. And the thing that in my mind, I was thinking, I finally made the decision that we were going to go ahead with the robotic surgery, not the routine surgery, which would have been more invasive. And why I made that surgery was not because it was a technological decision. It was a decision because it was the best cardiac surgeon there. He focused on the quality of life for my father and understood. He did a fantastic job of listening to him and to my questions and was very patient. And was very clear that he was focusing on not only the quality of the surgery, but what would come as quality of life after that. So this was very clearly his focus. So the robotic surgery was a consequence of me having faith in this expert and the faith in the quality of treatment that my father was getting. So the purpose of me sharing this story was when we make decisions about what's important, it's rarely about the technology, it's because the technology is a means to an end. it's still about the outcome, the big picture focus. Yeah? And I go back to architecture, it's like I don't think we're designing, and this is something I try to bring into design technology, that you're not designing in a myopic view. Think about the big picture, think about the focus, think about these bigger things that matter, and make the choices that get you to the best outcome. So I think the thing we need to realize about humans are we are incredibly creative, resilient, innovative, and all of these things. And the technology we're creating is an outcome of what we are able to do. And you have a lot. This can be one of those. What do you say? Opens up a lot more of the human potential. Because there's a lot of fear, at least in the design community. I don't know as much if that's the case with architecture. That there's this fear of, our jobs are getting replaced. But heck no. Think about it. When electricity was discovered, the guy who was lighting up the lamp on every street probably had to go look for a new job. But will we ever go back to the time of not having electricity and how much it has unpacked for us and how much it's brought to us? Right? So it's very empowering to think about the sort of inflection point that we are with intelligence and the opportunities that it presents. And as a design community as large, I would say, is to go back and utilize this as an ability to say, what are we uniquely positioned to do with this that technology potentially cannot by itself, and we can shape where technology goes with this in a larger scale. And that's a little bit of primer, it's not a lecture. So any questions there, I'm happy. But before I go, a little bit of my background. Like Nishant saying, I went to school with him in MSU and then decided to go do my master's because I was not convinced that I was qualified enough to work outside and not do damage. And also because I felt like I needed to there were deeper questions I was asking. So I ended up doing my master's and a master in design in Texas A&M. And I was really lucky to do the course more as a research discipline and ended up getting to deeper questions about, why, what are the philosophies around this, where else can this be applied? And landed up in an internship with Eastman Kodak. You all know Eastman Kodak? Kodak company, the camera.
Yeah.
You all are saying yes, but look at these guys now.
Nobody remembers Kodak, is it?
Kodak is a camera. It's a generational thing, yeah.
Oh my god.
See, yeah, this is,
Oh god.
yeah. Date yourself right there. So, this is a company. Yeah.
So I joined very recently. I don't know which college are you from?
MSU, Baroda.
MSU.
Yeah.
Wow. You guys don't know Kodak? नहीं अब तो अभी तो बताया Kodak. Really?
Kodak सुना ना?
It's not familiar to
Take.
us.
Yeah. I'm telling you, this is.
Like when you say it, we'll know, but it's not familiar.
It's okay. It's okay.
Just like a
Sorry.
phone is today, probably the Kodak camera was with us always in our bag in college.
That मतलब ये था कि Kodak, it's a Kodak moment. मतलब it's a picture worthy.
Absolutely.
It was an adjective.
It's a Kodak
Yeah.
moment.
It's like Photoshop. This used to be that.
Yeah,
At that point.
It used to be an adjective.
So, but the interesting thing, there's a reason you all don't know about Kodak because it's faded away in the background. Right? There's a reason. But I had the opportunity to work with their group called Corporate Design and Usability. And suddenly it opened up this whole world for me where I was able to apply all kinds of things that I know in my architecture education into a digital space. I would do these lot of user tests and studies and stuff like that, which was very akin to sort of doing your studies before you go into a project, right? And understanding who you're designing things for, why you're designing this, what does success look like. And then once you've deployed that, you actually do the test to see whether it's successful or not, whether there are improvements. I mean, I'm over minimizing the statement, but that was a huge seminal moment for me to say that, from a oldest of design disciplines in architecture, there was so much that I could apply into a digital space. And I learned a ton. And at that time, there was no such thing called user experience, nothing. It was called human factors. The things that sounded least human is what it was called. Computer-human interactions, all of that. But it was really exciting to be able to see that transformation. And then I ended up working for all kinds of different companies, designed products for Army, Air Force, Homeland Security for the United States of America. So think about a tiny Indian woman in all of these very American setups and designing things for things that I would absolutely have no idea about, but learned a giant ton trying to design for people and spaces. Again, applied architecture, what do? We design spaces. I don't do that anymore, but you design spaces for professionals to be successful at their jobs. But you're not going to become a doctor or an academician, but you'll be designing educational institutes, you'll be designing spaces for other people to kind of experience that area of specialization. So there's a lot of translation, so I ended up, fast forward, Adobe, and ended up loving enabling people building teams, and here I am. I lead an organization for them, lead a business for them, and get them to care about design and design choices. So it's a lot of fun.
Interesting, you mentioned like Kodak moments, you said Photoshop this, Photoshop that. So, what's new at Adobe now? What's the latest tech that you're working on, or
So, yeah.
how is it evolving? Because I remember when we met in December at the reunion, you were having a brief discussion and you were telling me that how AI is coming into some of the modules that you were developing and things like that.
But all the softwares are now, they have like
She
an
was
AI.
saying that they were working on something which
Yeah.
was going to be.
So, yeah, a lot of it, that's right. So, Adobe has 3 businesses. One is the creative, please tell me this is more familiar than Kodak products, but anyway. There's Creative Cloud, which is Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, all of that. Then you've got Document Cloud, which is PDF and the family of products there. Can you all still hear me? We're okay, right? Yeah. And then the third business is the business that I run the design organization for. It's called Experience Cloud. We build products for marketers, advertisers, analysts, all of that. So think about I don't know what your in brands are over here, but let's say Nike is a brand, right? As if you're buying Nike products, you probably they are interested in you having a sustained relationship with them, and you interact with them through your apps, through emails, through display ads that you see, or so they want to really keep you as a very engaged consumer on that side. So how do they interact with you? So marketers, advertisers, and data analysts who are putting together those experiences are trying to deliver the right experience at the right time to the right person. So we create a huge, enterprise of products to enable that to happen. So to answer your question, what are we doing right now? So the Adobe's mission really is to revolutionize digital experiences on the world. So from the creative who is using all our creative products to create those Instagram ads, display ads, all of that for these brands, to the marketers being able to sustain and create these journeys and experiences optimized by the brand. That's what we're doing. So what we're doing is on the creative side, we are investing in a lot of digital generative technology called Firefly, which helps you sort of, and it's a very safe environment because it doesn't use any, you can't, it's very IP safe for brands particularly, right? When they're generating imagery or generating ads, they can't have situations where those ads and the creatives have intellectual conflict with things like that. For example, if you say, hey, give me an ad that looks like Superman, you will not get anything from our models because that's IP. It's stuff like that. So on the creative side, we're doing a lot of really interesting, intelligent work to be able to, even sell Photoshop. You probably have tried some of these things, generative fill, then vector to, you can prompt with text and you create imagery from that. There are video generations that you can do from prompting right now. So there's a lot of interesting technology that we're putting together, 3D imaging and creating animations. So there's a lot of work that's being done. And the focus really is to become a companion with the creator on the other side, the designer on the other side, to say how can we amplify the work, how can we enable them to do more and more ideation sooner in the process, how do we make sure that they're getting a lot of the feeds already in, how might we help them scale their production so that who wants to be doing the same repetitive tasks again and again. So using a lot of the AI technology to do that on the creative side. On the document cloud side, we're doing a lot of the work on bringing a whole bunch of documents together so that you can summarize, consume. And it's not very different from what you can do in ChatGPT or any of these things, but again in a much more, would you say, a brand safe environment for them to do that, and it's referenceable. And really allowing you, and now document cloud is also sort of evolving to more of getting presentations and all of that. And on the creative side as well, we're breaking through to new. We can't imagine that people have the tolerance to learn complicated software like Photoshop and Illustrator still. So doing Express and those projects and all of that stuff, trying to streamline processes. And then on the enterprise side, which is the most complicated of experiences, and we do a lot of system design, and this is where I really go back to my architecture background to say that we are not about just this creating the visuals. Right? Think about whether if we were just about painting and decorating an architecture, that would be such a dismissive way of looking at our discipline. But it's really about designing what are the systems behind it, what are the objects, how do you make people successful, widely successful in our products. How might this individual who's working in a team say that, my next promotion came because I used these products to increase the revenue or the adoption in my consumer base. So a lot of the innovation that's going inside that side is also, I would say, about more AI and AI agent-based experiences is really being saying, okay, I want to create the most, give me the impulses, right? Get me accelerated workflows to create the most engaging ads or engaging marketing content, and how do you take it? Yeah. So a lot of, intelligence and intelligent workflows embedded. So that the mission of my team is say, how do we enable our customers to create magical moments for their consumers in our products? So that's the mission.
So you have a background in architecture, and now you're practicing core design. And you did mention about systems thinking, which is now actually being talked about a lot in the field of design, especially architecture, because it stops. It ceases to exist as just a building design, but just like you said, and especially for a firm like ours, where we have multidisciplinary team is quite diverse. So, and we work at various scales, different types of products. So systems thinking is an integral part of how we work and think. So my question is really that what kind of possibilities do you think may come up for architects or even architects and designers? Because I think even the fields of design and architecture are kind of slowly emerging. Just to give you an example, right now we're just doing a road development project in a heritage town called Badnagar in Gujarat. And there is a lot of elements design also a part of which is a part of the entire open design that we're doing. So it could involve a lot of engineering aspects like stormwater drains, design that to a certain capacity, looking at climate data and stuff. And it could go down to the last detail of the furniture, planters, tree guards, signages, structures, or whatever else. So, from your experience and your background, what kind of possibilities do you think? Because we have a diverse team and we're all working on these projects. So right now we're in the moment and we're going with the flow, and we know a lot of infrastructure is being built in our country. What do you think will come up? Or in what ways would the make a field sort of evolve? It's a large question.
It is, and plus you all are the experts here as far as architecture goes. But I'm willing to at least brainstorm there, right? It's a very interesting prospect.
You could ask from a tech perspective.
Yeah. I think I go back to even during our reunion, I was trying to understand where everybody is in their architectural journeys, right? You could see wisdom in all of their eyes, where it says, sometimes you get reduced to decorators in some cases, and you really don't want to, not because I don't think anybody enjoys doing that necessarily, but it feels like it has really undercut the value that you get delivered. So deeply speaking, this is the correlation. Again, this might be incomplete because I'm not a practicing architect for 25 years, so take this with a grain of salt. This is the correlation I keep giving it. This is not a full answer to system, but there's a relationship between urban design and being an architect. And if you just think about the quality of life in cities where there is a lot of thought put into the urban design, and then a beautiful place that you're living in, let's say just a home. Yes, you can probably have a pretty wonderful experience inside of a home, but immediately the quality of life is compromised when you step out. If it's so hard to figure out the systems around it, there is a direct correlation. That's why you have cities like Copenhagen or Amsterdam where you're like, oh my God, the quality of life. People are healthy there, they are happy there, it's a correlation. I think it's a giant outcome of people thinking about the systems first, so that the atomic design at that level, as an architect is putting together, or even an individual just creating a space for them inside their home, has so much more value because it's a multiplicative impact, right? You have it amplifies what you can get out of that. So that correlation still exists today in terms of system design and all of that. And particularly with technology, if you are using technology very superficially, I think you're going to go back to just, it's going to be an experiment and an entertainment, and nobody's going to take it any further. In my discipline, at least, when I say, if you're creating AI intelligent tools, people are definitely not, particularly big enterprise organizations are not going to run their business on entertainment. If it goes wrong, there's millions and millions of rupees and dollars under, they lose if they do that. So if you build those systems with very clear models behind it, you have an opportunity to learn what's working, and if you want to bring change, the change comes about everywhere. I'll give you an example, right? And this has less to do with the intelligence. When user experience also went through an inflection point, and the products that I work on, a lot of it came from acquisitions. We kept acquiring a new company every couple of years, and it was a nightmare because designing, and these are enterprise systems, right? It's not just about changing the UI of a product. You have to think about, where is the data stored, where are the connections being made, what's the translation rate, all of that. So at one point we said, this is ridiculous because we have to spend a lot more time. We need to make time to design the systems and make the fundamental changes. We are not going to design UI, we're going to design systems, visual design systems that will produce the UI based on an outcome. And because we did that, we're able to now infuse that sort of thinking into the AI tools so that we are not spending time generating screens. We are generating frameworks. So when we're thinking about enterprise systems, my team, yes, most of you, I don't know, screen design is what they would sometimes come to. And we would say, hang on, let's ask the primary questions right here. What are the main objects in the system? So you have the audience, the journey. I'm going back to Lingos and our team, right? But these are the currencies that our customers are hoping that the user experience will keep very, very honest and governed with the process. So going back to your question, Madhu, I feel like it's going to be critical that we think about systems as not separate from. The systems are going to be the key to the bigger outcomes and the bigger problems that we're solving, because the layer of the expression of those systems, there are going to be many options, right? And then you say, okay, what are the themes that you want to put on top of that? I'm oversimplifying what I'm trying to say. You could, there's so much creativity there, and you can probably use AI, and we were talking about this earlier, right? You can create facades, but if you've got the right system in place.
It's like we are having this discussion. हमारे professors हमेशा बोलते थे concept क्या है? If you have a good concept for your campus or your building or whatever you're doing, then everything else falls in place because it's just there is that common thread which ties the design. But please, floor is open for questions. Please go ahead.
If you did your bachelor's in architecture, do you think any of those skills or being in that environment for 5 years is helping you or did help you when you were transitioning a bit more towards design?
Yes, even today, 25 years later also I say. I think one is, it sort of made me approach user experience a lot more systematically to begin with. And I don't know if you all heard, I was just telling Manu earlier, is that technology, unfortunately, and my dad is in the manufacturing business, and so he'd be terrified if he sees the way we work. Because every 3 weeks there's a release, and quality is not a thing that we put that much, and he was in a car manufacturing university, mind you. So once it leaves the shop floor, it's gone, you can't touch it, so you have to be like hyper careful. And architecture is something like that. Like once you stand up that thing, you can't bury your mistakes, so you better do a lot of the work up front. Humility needs to be there, right? You don't know the answers to everything. So it fundamentally changed the way I look at it. There was a lot of humility in which I approached. I know it sounds like a very principled answer, but it always leaves you asking for I don't know more than I know. Right? It opens you to that approach of thinking. And I would say systematic processes were something that was, and it was the oldest design disciplines, right? And our professors, I'm sure you're seeing this as well, it's like there's a rigor to us There is design, you have design as a subject every semester, and they feed it into you that you have to keep rethinking. And something I remember from our design days, we used to be given this design, these 4-hour problems or something. You get them time problems in the morning and you have to give it to that. And I remember this Matai sir, he said, when I give you a problem like that, you better be spending 3.5 hours solving the problem and the last half an hour doing the presentation. Because you need to be doing problem solving, spend as much time problem solving as possible. So it's like, it's that approach, that rigor to the way we work that I think is missing in many other design disciplines. I used to call up my parents after every semester and say, please don't allow anybody in 3 generations to want to do architecture. It was so hard. It was so hard, but I think it prepared me for life, literally prepared me for life. Because it just teaches you, there is no replacement to hard work. There is no replacement to doing, no matter how fancy your presentation is, if your fundamentals are not done and if you don't follow a process, and the other thing I would say is, design as the architecture is a discipline which I noticed, even though we didn't go through management training, taught me to bring people along on my ideas. I had to explain, it had to be very rational. Our choices had to be very rational. Your juries would beat you to crap and take you to pieces if you didn't have your logic in place. Right? It's not an art discipline. Architecture was very much a discipline about bringing, of course, the age-old form and function. Yeah, but there was no, yes, there are architects who yeah, there's a very strong rationality, and I think it just permeated the way I work. And I don't see that when people come from an advertising or marketing background, you have to kind of ratchet them back here and say, what's the rationale? Where are you thinking? Who are you solving the problem for? What does success look like? How are you staying accountable in the process? Post-occupancy evaluation or something like that. We used to call it. I don't remember, but yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
What do you think about Laurie Baker?
Laurie Baker?
Yeah.
Very inspiring. Still chooses to be very inspiring. When I look at Laurie Baker's work and the truth that his work showed to the materials, right? It never pretended to be something else. And there was so much beauty in the way, the genuineness that we saw in a lot of his work is.
Okay, another question is, now you're coming from America, did you land today? Or you studied in America?
I did my master's in
You did your master's in America. So this is a very silly question. But now we were discussing, I was having this discussion with another architect friend of mine, and we were talking about how Americans use toilet paper so much. So do you really think that was an issue? Or do you think that, okay, Indians use water a lot in their toilets? Or, I'm just asking because this is since you have
from a sustainability angle, or what's the angle?
No, so since she has studied a master's in America, so that is what I'm asking. So you were around people who come from many different countries, from overseas, and all those things. So living in a hostel. Was that an issue for you? Like you have people from Egypt, you have people from or Americans. Okay,
yeah.
Localites. If you talk about the localites, and people say that Americans use toilet paper so much. So as an Indian, did you feel that awkwardness, or did you feel very? And what is your opinion about the toilet paper?
Well, interesting. There's a spectrum there. I tried. When I went into Baroda, Nishant, Anubhuti, Abhishek, the 4 of us were the outer state.
There's someone named Anubhuti also in your group.
She's also
Anubhuti. Okay. There were 4 of us who were outer state candidates, and it was very clear. We were as stood out as sore thumbs.
The college had a quota of 4 outside Gujarat candidates.
Yeah,
others were all.
So I guess with the point I'm trying to make, I grew the most because I came from the south of India. My knowledge on Hindi was academic at best. So, and my kurtas, it was not fashionable then, but my pajama used to be slightly higher than my ankle, and I got made crap ton of fun of. But I would tell you this, and I live in a state now. I'm just fast forward, right? I live in a state now with mostly white American people. And I go dressed like this to work sometimes. It's not like I'm doing this just because I'm here. I'm very comfortable in this. But the appreciation for me is that you surround yourself with different kinds of people. You're putting yourself in an opportunity to learn. There's no question. Second, I would say, whether it's a question about toilet paper or water, the curiosity and asking and saying why, right? And not being judgmental about it. You know, how many people have asked me, like, hey, you come from India, why did you choose not to have only one child? I live in a state where it's common to have 4 kids and above. So, and I had a kid later in life, and I think people my age have 3 grandkids already over there. So it's, you know, there's always like different contexts. And you know, I know you're talking. There is always going to be choices people make, and being curious to ask why they make the choice and not judging it is very important. Politically speaking, also there are so many extreme opinions, but I don't think we do ourselves any credit by judging somebody immediately about it. By being able to say, okay, where did it come from? You know, and there is a really beautiful radio show host. There's a guy I saw who presented this. He's a founder of a phenomenal radio show. I'm forgetting the name right now. And there are so many extreme opinions happening over here. And he gave a data that very often the extremes are only the 5% population on both ends. Mm-hmm. So 90% of the people, you put 2 people who think very differently, who have been voted very differently, they can't look each other in the eye and say they hate each other. You can't. You simply can't. There's more things that bind you that keep you apart. And the beauty of you having all of those contextual different experiences are the ones that make you richer for what you are. So whether that is you use toilet paper, you use water, as long as you're making an informed choice about not excessive use and you're being calm. I mean, even today, I grew up in a middle class family. I thank God that I have so much that my child doesn't have to think about, it lives in plenty. But even today, the conversation happens about what's a want, what's a need. He goes to a private school in the US, which is not cheap, but I made a very conscious choice, and there are friends in his class that show up in different cars, and I say, yes, we could also go buy those cars, but we choose not to, because we choose to put our money in places where we have more income. So I appreciate.
What is the name of your university from which you did masters?
Texas A&M.
Okay.
It's yeah.
Fine. Very nice. I'm carrying a bookmark which says The Blind Matriarch, Namita Gokhale, and a poor and entertaining novel by a hugely talented writer. So I read a lot. I do write. Now, if I think I'm audible and I don't need a mic,
Yeah.
so I'm reading a poem. So this poem I wrote on 6th July, and this I edited it on ChatGPT later on. But this was something which I instantly wrote. This is the second version. The first version of the poem I wrote at Archana, right? And it describes all the scenes which I have seen after coming to Delhi from Udaipur and from Rajasthan. And then I wrote a second poem when my friend was just about to leave, and he told me, why do you write it? Why do you write it? Do you think ChatGPT is a problem, or do you think what is there in your mind? And he's a very good artist. He paints very well. He does a lot of things very well. He's also a professor. So he said that one is an artist, one is probably, we were having all those discussions, and we are together since 2016. We were interns at Abhikram in Ahmedabad, and we are still there. I don't know how. So he was saying that I was very skeptical, and I said that I probably am very vulnerable when I express. The time when I write is very different, and the time when I start expressing things, it is very different. It is not the same, right? And he describes that when I paint for me light matters a lot, right? Because it's the angle from which the light is coming on the canvas. So for him, the light matters a lot, and for me, I think we were together and we were discussing all that, and he left. He left to meet another friend of his, and I took this diary and I wrote that poem. Again, this is the second version of the poem, and I'm just randomly reading it today. I don't know why. I just decided to do so. Yesterday we were having that conversation of Supreme Court, and just after that I received a message saying that the maid's mother has died, and his brother had an accident. He left to Gurgaon. We could not meet last night. I became very sick today, and I entered post lunch to the office. And yeah, I am working after I was a professor before, assistant professor at Thiagarajan School of Architecture. I very recently joined, I think last Thursday, right? So it is all that trauma probably, and I was saying to someone amongst them that when people are in transition, they are like shifting places from one place to another. They are very restless, right? So probably, I mean, if it heals anyone, or if it is used to anyone sitting in this office at the basement, so if it heals anyone, so I'm just reading those 2 pages if you have patience enough. I moved into this city. I wish to meet him. I moved into the city. I wished to meet him. He left uncalled. He left soon. I watched my watch. I checked and then there's a dash and says every day. And near that I have written all those, when you were describing about toilet paper and all those things which were coming to my head. The next goes. To find his trace, the city where I came, back to find remembrance of this old man. In poems, in piano, in jazz, in moving leaves, in writing lips, in playing music between my fingers, between remembering a lost song, between remembering old sex. I moved to this city. I wished him too much. I wished to meet him. I wish to see his face. I wish to see the change. He left unsettled, and I moved to this city. Now a letter folds in my hands. A drum plays outside. I lean by the wall, recalling strength of his shoulder, looking at falling leaves, looking at changing skies, looking at changing ages. This face of a man, this trace of a city, this trace of me, this trace of a city. When I moved, uncalled, unwanted, undone, moved, waiting for the trace of this man, for the trace of this city.
I had a question, ma'am. I wanted to ask, since you talked about that you design user interface. Yeah, so you mentioned that you design user interface for the company. So, like, can you share what thought you have behind, like, how do you start the process of when a client comes to you and then you start designing the user interface? So, can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. What's your name?
Ashika.
Ashika. I should have asked your Anubhuti. Right. Thank you, Ashika. So, at Adobe, though there are because it's my customers are customers that use our products, but I talk more in terms of I've had some agency experience as well, where I have to design experiences for very different kinds of people, right? So typically, a lot of what happens is that we sit down and talk about what they're wanting from their experience. Harking back to maybe when I designed the tool for the Air Force people going into training in the American Air Force contingent. So we sit down and talk to them in terms of what is it that they're trying to achieve. So okay, this is a training tool. We need to make sure they get this many hours in before they actually sit on a flight. A lot of simulations. So we need to make sure that the tooling is giving us good feedback, that we have confidence that when we put them in the actual, this is from 20 years ago, right? Put them in the actual cockpit, that a lot of choices that they're making don't result in bad consequences, right? Their safety is priority. So things like that. So we spend some time, very similar to probably when your clients come and say, okay, what is the brief? What do you want? So we spend time with them. Then we spend time in their context. I go and make visits with them. Again, I don't think that's very. This is where I think for the question of this is architecture days. Like you don't just impulsively put something together. I know it feels very tempting, particularly in digital design. People, I have to encourage people, please hand sketch karo. Make notes. Maybe that's good. Yeah, it's something that it's important because the thinking differs when you put pencil to paper. So go to the sites and hilarity for me, right? And I had to go to a lot of these places. Honestly, up until very recently, I was a citizen only from India, so I had to get a lot of clearances to go to these places. And things are always up and down. But I would go spend time. I would understand because it was a different cultural context, so I can't make any assumptions. I generally had, I would start gearing up, and that was early in my career, but I had at least one or two other designers. I would bring other people along. So I partner mostly with product managers, so there's a three-legged stool of sorts, right? So the product management side of things, they represent the business. The user experience represents the people who will be using the tool, so, right? And sometimes they're very different people. People who are signing, let's say, I guess Manu and Nishant are signing on which software you're going to get, but you're the ones who are using it on a day-to-day basis. So they are the buyers, you are the practitioners to allow this. So, but the product management people typically are working on, how can my business make money and how will the buyers be convinced to use this. The third leg of that stool is engineering, who are actually building the product. So we think about the construction side of things, because that's the bulk of the contractors that you use and all that. So, but I would bring people along, but very often, because their knowledge has to also, they need to be not just thinking about technology and business, they need to think about how this individual who's using that product has to be successful. That should be the product. So I would bring them along with me to those site visits and insert myself, spend a lot of time to understand. Then come back, develop some concepts, depending on the era that I designed in, which is multiple right now. I would take back and say, hey, see, I think you can draw parallels there. Sometimes I would take working prototypes with me, do some usability tests to say, hey, is this working? What am I learning from it? Learning to do research without asking super biased questions. Saying, do you like this is a very bad way of testing, right? But really seeing whether it drives to the success that you want. Refining the process, working with engineering, making compromises where something is technologically not possible. And then you keep that cycle going. But once that's over, making sure you go back and check with them, is this still working for you? What can I learn from this process that I can feed back into the next process? So, very briefly, that is sort of the engagement side.
So, the people in your team, either interns or people who are employed by you, are they from the design background mostly, or like administration or engineering or what?
So, people on my team are mostly designers, but a lot of them have started coming from architecture. So somebody has unpacked that mystery that architects seem to be doing well as user experience designers because we are deeply rooted in the way we problem solve. I have design researchers on my team, and then I have content strategists on my team, and I have a few prototypers who are across. They don't do the development, but they help us sort of bring a concept of good life. I work very closely with product management side of the business and the engineering side of the business as well. But on my team, I would say this is generally the concept. And I have program managers and operations side of them so that they can keep me accountable if I'm actually
taking her question further. So in your enterprise design part of things, let's say you're launching a creative plugin for software or whatever. What is the actual testing parameter before you actually launch it? Like for us, before we give a GFC, there's 2 levels of checking, and then on the site we have some test filing done from this, that. There's these quality checks. So when, let's say, Adobe is going to launch a new product which your team has initially thought of, and then the engineers have developed it, what is the rigor that it goes through before actually?
Yeah, you're going to be very disappointed in my answer. This is where we need to take lessons from architecture and manufacturing industry, because quality is, unfortunately, it's because you have the it's like that business, right? Because it's all it's on the cloud, right? Everything you can upload changes and say there's a bug in the system, so upload, make the changes, escalation you will figure it out. So the way it goes, the rigor, my preference would be that we have a much higher baseline. Right? And if you set up the process in front, because if you people confuse speed and velocity a lot in the technology industry. Good ideas, usually they want to get it done without thinking. It's a solution chasing a problem. So if you do the thinking of, who are you making this thing for? What would make them successful? And make sure you're reminding yourself of the process. So what we go through is we go through alpha, beta cycles, where we bring in a small percentage of our customers to use it in a slightly safer environment. Then you go through beta, which is a slightly larger customer base. Then you let it loose on everybody. But that is probably my biggest pet peeve
That
with
could
this
be
process.
the target audience.
Yeah, it is the
Sample
target.
from the
Yeah.
target audience.
Yeah. And my two biggest beefs with the system is there's not enough rigor. We don't hold ourselves to technology that typically doesn't hold us as a high quality. But it lets us be nimble and learn really quickly. What's working, what's not working is very good. And the other thing I would say is sort of, we fly by the seat of our pants a little bit, right? Because if you've created a solution chasing a problem, then you'll get another request and you'll again chase that and get it done, right? Without thinking about what value it is.
So there's AI now and then there's Adobe, right? And now Adobe has copied over AI, like they will bring their own AI into their own softwares, right? So how you're bringing your own competition, like there is a competition now,
Oh yeah.
a big competition out there. So how you're developing the research strategies and everything?
What's your name?
Done.
Competition is a good thing
Yeah.
because it keeps you relevant, it keeps you humble, it keeps you learning. So what Adobe does to stay competitive, one is we are a company that's very grounded in our value systems. So it tends to be a company that's not reactive. It doesn't say, oh yeah, this is a new development, let's immediately next week have a response to it. Which can be a little mind-numbing. I used to work for startups as well and I find the speed sometimes very slow. But I do appreciate that we don't jump on the bandwagon immediately and have a response. We take time to think about, okay, this is the right thing to do. What is the Adobe position on this? As an example, right, when there's a lot of AI software out there where you can generate a lot of imagery, a lot of videos, a lot of animation. But they don't think about the content authenticity side of things. And there is a significant, think about the designers, if you just steal their work and train models on top of that, you're stealing their profit. This is an unethical thing to do. So what Adobe did, just as an example with it, right? What Adobe did was it started creating, getting people with Sony's and these camera companies to say, let's put content authenticity as a tag on the imagery you're creating and create the technology to track whatever changes the image is in. So you can take that same image and go to the content. There's a content authenticity site. You can take an image and drop it into it. And if that content tag is added, you know what has changed and what has not. Because there's a lot of room. You see imagery and videos that it's a little scary about people. You can train voices and have them say things that they didn't say.
Yeah.
So which side of that story are you going to be on? So our competitive edge is to always do the right thing as much as possible with making choices on technology and still being very relevant.
What was the research part? How you're researching all of it?
How we're researching all of that. So depending on the side of the business, we have what's called the customer advisory boards and the user advisory boards. So constantly we are in touch with them. Even my own team, my user research team. It's very interesting. This goes back to your system question. So in the design discipline for a very long time, we used to use personas. So who are you designing for? And you animate this person. This is Shilpa, and she is a new age designer, and and all of that. But slowly we started realizing that we were breathing so much life into it that it was not being relevant as a product anymore. Right? You're not designing in this case, there's a difference between designing a house for a family or a room for someone versus designing a hospital for a lot of people to come to. That's where the system design. So when we're doing our research and when we take it to understanding who's that individual, what role do they play in the team, how does the team rally up to the organization of the company, and then we use a framework called jobs to be done to understand, even kind of slightly objectively remove, because people are wearing a lot of multiple hats. Jobs are changing, roles are not. Yeah. So kind of accommodating for the human being, someone who's going to grow into all of these jobs and particularly depending on the company, they're going to play multiple roles, all of that. So we use these forums to continuously check when our archetypes roles are still relevant, our understanding of the jobs to be done frameworks together. Do we understand what the definition of success for this individual as part of a team, part of an organization, all of that. So we stay in touch. We regularly we touch base with people who are using our products, and we do sort of unbiased research with people who are not using our products, so that we know, we are not siloed into thinking that what we have is the next best thing, right? It's golden. We are very careful to know that there's enough competition out there, and we have to be learning from the Canvas and the Figmas out there as well. So.
Further, otherwise, I think we will have to go more 7:30.
Yeah.
One more question? Okay. Let's take the last question.
मेरा सवाल ऐसा है कि आप 25 साल से आप डिफरेंट से आप आर्किटेक्चर से तो हम आर्किटेक्ट्स जब हम कोर्स करते हैं तो वी गॉट एन आई ऑफ ऑब्जर्वेशन कि हम डिटेलर से यही हमने आर्किटेक्चर छोड़ दिया है बट हमारी ऑब्जर्वेशन हम ऑब्जर्व करते हैं तो आपने अभी तक कैसे देखा है कि हमारा आर्किटेक्चर किस तरह इवॉल्व हुआ है अभी तक बिकॉज मतलब जैसे हम अपने कोर्स करने में पढ़ते थे चार्ल्स कोलिया लॉरी बेकर एंड अभी जो करेंट आर्किटेक्ट्स हैं वो किस तरह से कंटेम्परेरी आर्किटेक्चर पे इवॉल्व कर रहे हैं
Details. This is going to sound a little feminist, but I'm so glad to see so much more of women architects being celebrated. Really, I mean, it's really phenomenal to think about that. वो एक बड़ा सा change that I feel like, and not because just as women being architects, there is a approach to the whole area that's starting to become. Okay, I'll tell you why I'm saying this. I'm on the board of a non-profit also. Its name है Women of the World, and Women of the World. America में बहुत सारे refugees आते हैं, so they come from a lot of, for whatever reason, let's not get into the politics of it. बहुत सारे लोग आते हैं, they get displaced because of very very dire circumstances. So the purpose of this organization is to focus on elevating the women of the family because they tend to bring everybody else up. And I'm sort of saying with bringing and highlighting what women do naturally. I mean, I feel like we've strengthened the discipline of all of our design disciplines just seeing women succeed. And when you see them being celebrated and see the work that being celebrated, you see a nuance to it that I didn't see in the past. हम लोग जब architecture पढ़ते थे, I don't think I've seen we know of any one woman architect in the discipline. आजकल तो बहुत सारे कुछ होता है. And then the other shift I have seen is, हम लोग जब पढ़ते थे, we used to care about the details, but I felt like we were sort of under the gun of the contractors and the people. जिस तरीके से design technology आज सफर करता है, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the engineers. वो लोग जो बनाते हैं वही खड़ा रहता है. No matter what my team designs, I have to live with it. It's pretty terrible, right? And I know, but please listen to them. There's a reason I say that because these your designers are not making it purely difficult for you because their aesthetics matter. There is true consequences to making bad choices and compromises there. Yeah. So where I'm seeing right now, there's so much boldness with architects owning the charter above, seeing leaders like Anu, Nishant and their parents and all of that, owning that because it matters what you prioritize. Otherwise, the details kahan dikhte hain. I mean, and it's the details that adds the beauty to that manifests and says, oh yaar, ye details se pata chalta hai ki system design kisi ne kiya hai, socha hai. There's a rhythm to this, right? I'm seeing a lot more of that. और तीसरा चीज बोलूँगी कि I'm not a big fan of fan area. I guess there are some people there because I find it very, very arrogant. And I used to feel like it, and that's the conflict I used to have as an architect. Now, if you're not that big, then it doesn't matter, I suppose. But the thing that I've seen right now is people are starting to surface up and think about a lot of things that matter. That's bringing a lot of more beauty and diversity to the creations that I'm seeing. It's pretty beautiful. I don't know if I answered your question, but those are some of the things that come to mind. What do you see has changed?
I see जिस तरह से टेक्नोलॉजी जो है वो बिल्डिंग एलिमेंट्स में इंकॉर्पोरेट हो रही है, तो वो चेंज एक तरीके से कंटेम्परेरी आर्किटेक्चर हमारे
That's very true. It's made a lot of things possible, right? जो conceptualize कर सकते हैं, and it's made it accessible also to a lot of people, right? वो ऐसा लगता था कि only the big wigs will get to make all of these. मुझे अपना 5th year का final design project अभी याद आता था. I would feel very scared taking stuff out there. कि बोल देंगे कि this is not possible.
But this question to both of you, when you decided, I mean, I don't know when this office was made and how did you decide to get this basement and all those things. Why did you put a mirror on that wall? What was the reflection behind it?
Introspection. I don't know. Please speak first.
There wasn't any specific reason to it. It was a blank wall and we've been waiting, but actually team knows about it, for art goals to come up and stuff. I thought by adding mirrors we've been able to add a little depth, rather than just looking at a blank wall. I think that was primarily the purpose.
You see all your beautiful faces now reflected.
But I think today I realized when I was discussing with Ayush, actually I wasn't, he sits there facing that side. And I was standing behind him and there was no space. So I was talking to him. And it worked so well. He becomes a girl.
I thought that was the reason.
Yeah,
See,
you should not be saying, right? Yeah, I said it's a messy basket.
So this Ayusha's question, I just add, we've been having a lot of dialogue about this and how in the old times or even when we were growing up, there were these master architects, just like पुराने ज़माने में master builder was.
Yeah.
So, but in today's day and age, everything is just more for the community. It's like there are no superstars. So gone are the days of superstars.
Gone the days of Laurie Baker.
Yeah. I mean, now it's every person because information is so accessible, technology is accessible, that you don't really have to look up to any particular individual and follow their work. There is enough information for you to develop your own language, your own story, and do the stuff that you wish to do. So, if I were to answer that question, I would probably put it that way.
That's really true. That is very true.
In fact, on the contrary, and to add to what you're saying, it's actually the time of the masses. Because you see all these, even a tool for Adobe, for a tool to be successful, it will be something that the masses will, adopt. So it's actually the common man who becomes the hero.
Yeah. When we think about even some of our creative tools and all of that, which potentially the scare is they put people out of business, it's not true. You can develop uniquely your style and have the model learn that style, and then imagine how much more you can create, right? You don't have to sweat over just one. When you've created a few, then the model is able to pick up from what your style is and is able to give you so much more inspiration. It leaves you room to do so many more things that you didn't find. That's very true. It's made accessible. I'm saying something very provocative right now. Just तरीके से hiring भी चलता है. What is the meaning of pedigree anymore? Right? Because learning should be a constant journey. It should be for all of us, and learning cannot just be confined to the schools you go to. Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic questions. Yeah. Thank you.
I have
one more.
बचपन से मुझे हॉलीवुड मूवीज देखी आप परसेप्शन वाले से जो हॉलीवुड मूवी इमेजिन करते हैं आज से 10-15-20 साल पहले दैट 20 साल में वो एक टेक्नोलॉजी में डेवलपमेंट है एक्चुअली हम जब फर्स्ट एड को मूवी देखते हैं वो जब कोई साथ वीडियो कॉल करते हैं तो उसका कोई इमेजिन नहीं कर सकता कि इस चीज हो सकता है वो होगा देन अगर इन टेक्नोलॉजी गेटिंग रोम तो हमारी सबसे पहली ये कैटेगरी है जो है हमारी टर्मिनेटर मूवी की साइड है ऑल ओवर वर्ल्ड सारे कंप्यूटर्स को हैंडल लेते हैं तो जब आजकल पूरा वर्ल्ड टेक्नोलॉजी ड्रिवन है तो क्या स्टार्टअप जो टेक्नोलॉजी कंपनीज है वो उस चीज को सिक्योर करती हैं जो गलत चीजों में ना पड़े वो एक बैक ऑफ द माइंड की चीजें वो रहती हैं
सबके रहते हैं कि नहीं मुझे नहीं पता. कोई भी जब अपॉर्चुनिटी होता है आई थिंक इट्स एब्सोल्युटली ट्रू कि वो उसका मिसयूज भी होगा और उसका अच्छी तरीके का यूज भी होगा. आई एम एन इटर्नल ऑप्टिमिस्ट. I believe in goodness in humanity. I believe there are extremes. Unfortunately, media सब extremes को ही दिखाते हैं. But there is more good than there is bad. So, the power of the masses is to uplift people who are doing it for the right reasons, right? And encourage that behavior and celebrate that behavior, and don't fall for the extremes as much as possible. But I love the analogy. Just Hollywood or Bollywood allows you to dream about these things and at least see these ideas. Mythology. Think about how much innovation was there. Maybe they had already innovated and it was a whole era, but we lost all of that. The flying vahanas and all of that, right? Planes. Who conceptualized that all of that so many years ago? And it could be misused. It could be used to handle, abduct somebody, but it could be used to amazing. Can you have peace missions and whatever else, right? There is. The reason I tell you, and I'm not advocating that you guys have to go, but the reason I go to Adobe every day is not because of the technology we work on. It's two reasons. It's because of our value systems, very strong value systems that I adhere to, and the people on my team that I tremendously proud of, and the culture that we created. This is why I go there. If that is there in an environment, in a startup environment, a small company, in a firm, you are going to look for ways to solve bigger problems.
Very nice. I think you had a question.
So it might be silly for you, but do you ever experience creative block?
Always. Always. And I also experience imposter syndrome. When people introduce me like I'm VP of Adobe, I feel like going and hiding under the table. I'm not kidding. I always do. There is, and for me, and I think you're going to ask me how I cope with it. It's not a silly question, by the way. It's never a silly question. I'm so glad you're asking, because sometimes, there was a person who in the India office, Noida office, she walked into my office and said, I'm having a fangirl moment, and I'm like, oh God, I don't know who you're talking to. I don't know this person that you're talking about. Because I internally don't feel like that. I really don't feel like that. But for me, creative unblock is one is asking questions and believing that I have the ability to solve it. Because I've solved these questions before, I've been able to, surrounding myself with people that are in it to, enable and be the type to resolve things. And then music. Music is generally the place of peace is music. And that does things to unblock things in a way that.
She's an incredible singer, by the way.
So that's what do you do? Okay, ideas from you.
I don't know. I ask my help from my friends, so they give some input, and then I get it.
What is your name again?
Ayush.
Very good question.
Anyone else?
Wanda?
You're a fun bunch, yeah. It's cool to hang out with architects. I don't think.
I would say that very candidly share that not only do you say, but you seem very, very cool and very relatable also. And it's with great generosity that you've taken very diverse questions and studies.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure you guys enjoyed.
How come I didn't get any questions about how Vishal was?